March 15, 1962, 2:23 in the afternoon. Guard Morrison made the mistake that would change everything. During the prisoner count in D Block, he looked at Bumpy Johnson and let the word slip, the forbidden term, the racial slur that no black man forgets. It hung in the air like poison gas, visible to everyone who heard it, burning through decades of accumulated pain in a single syllable. For 3 seconds, the corridor fell into absolute silence. 150 prisoners stopped breathing. Morrison realized his error too late. He saw in Bumpy's eyes that something had broken. It was not anger, it was decision. The kind of decision that comes when a man has calculated every possible consequence and chosen his path anyway. 15 minutes later, Morrison was on the floor, his jaw destroyed, hanging at an angle that defied human anatomy. The bone had shattered in 3 places, making a sound like a tree branch snapping under winter ice. The guards ran through the corridor screaming for reinforcements. "Solitary! Put him in solitary now!" But when they tried to drag Bumpy away, something impossible happened. 150 prisoners stood up as a single body. No word was spoken, just unified movement, silent, threatening, like a wave gathering strength before it crashes against the shore. The air itself seemed to change temperature. Every guard in that corridor suddenly understood they were not in control, had never been in control, and the illusion they had lived under for years was shattering right in front of them. Director Whitmore came running, his shoes squeaking against the polished concrete floor. He saw Morrison on the ground, his jaw dangling impossibly. He saw Bumpy standing, calm, waiting, like a man who had already played out this scenario 1,000 times in his mind. He saw 150 men ready to transform that corridor into a war zone. "If you touch him," said a voice from the crowd, nobody could identify whose, "This prison burns today." It was not a threat. It was a promise delivered with the certainty of a mathematical equation. To understand that moment, you need to know who Bumpy Johnson was inside that prison. He was not just another number. In 3 years at Attica, Bumpy had become something rare in the American prison system. A leader who commanded absolute respect from every faction, every group, every man, regardless of their color, their crimes, or their allegiances outside those walls. He had done what the prison administration could never do. He had created order from chaos, not through violence, but through something far more powerful. When Bumpy arrived in 1959, Attica was divided territory. Blacks against whites, Latinos against Irish, gangs against gangs. Daily violence, men disappearing, guards ignoring everything because the chaos served their purposes. The prison was a bomb ready to explode, and nobody was doing anything to prevent it. Murders happened in showers. Rapes occurred in storage rooms. The strong preyed on the weak, and the guards placed bets on who would survive the month. It was not a correctional facility. It was a gladiator arena with concrete walls. But Bumpy brought something from Harlem, from the streets where he had built his reputation. The idea that respect was stronger than fear. In the first 6 months, he negotiated territories, established rules, created peace where there had been war. When a prisoner was abused by guards, Bumpy intervened. When families needed help on the outside, Bumpy made phone calls. When younger inmates arrived terrified and vulnerable, Bumpy made sure they understood the rules that would keep them alive. He did not ask for payment. He did not demand loyalty. He simply acted with consistency, and men learned they could trust him in a place where trust was the rarest commodity. The guards hated this. They had lost control and they knew it. Captain Dalton, head of security, called a meeting with his team. 20 guards sitting around a table, all frustrated, all feeling the shift in power. "This man is running my prison," Dalton said, punching the table hard enough to make the coffee cups jump. "And I want to know how we are going to take back control." It was not about safety. It was not about order. It was about ego, about authority, about the fundamental belief that they, the guards, should dominate and prisoners should submit. Bumpy Johnson's existence challenged that belief at its core. "We provoke him," Morrison suggested, the guard who would be destroyed weeks later. "We make him lose his head in front of everyone. Then we have justification to isolate him permanently. Morrison was young, ambitious, eager to prove himself to Dalton. He did not understand yet that some men cannot be provoked into stupidity. Dalton smiled, the smile of a hunter who thinks he has found the perfect trap. Provocation is an art. It needs to be something he cannot ignore, something personal. It was Guard Stevens who suggested the term. You know his history, right? Grew up in the South, Georgia, saw lynchings as a child. That word, it has power over him. It always does. Stevens was older, had worked in prisons since the war, believed he understood the pressure points of every type of prisoner. Dalton thought for a moment, calculating. Then we use it during the count. Maximum exposure, maximum humiliation, in front of everyone. So when he breaks, nobody can defend him. 3 weeks before the incident, February 22nd, 1962, Morrison began the psychological game. Small provocations, lingering looks, whispered comments that Bumpy heard perfectly, testing limits, measuring reactions, looking for the crack in Bumpy Johnson's armor. He was following the playbook that guards had used for generations, the systematic degradation designed to break a man's spirit before breaking his body. Bumpy did not react. Every insult, every provocation he absorbed in silence. The other prisoners noticed. "Why are you taking this?" asked Marcus, leader of the Black Panthers inside the prison, a man serving 20 years for shooting 2 police officers during a traffic stop. Bumpy looked through the bars at the exercise yard beyond. Because men like Morrison want a reaction, and I do not give them what they want. It was a strategy he had learned on the streets of Harlem, where surviving meant knowing when to strike and when to wait. Patience was not weakness, it was preparation. But Morrison interpreted the silence as weakness. On March 8th, he pushed further. During food distribution, he knocked Bumpy's tray to the floor deliberately. "Oops," he said, laughing. "Slippery hands. Or maybe you should learn to hold things properly." The prisoners watched, waiting for Bumpy to explode, waiting for the violence that would justify the isolation cell. The food splattered across the floor, mashed potatoes and mystery meat mixing with dust and dirt. It was designed to be degrading, to force Bumpy to either clean it up like a servant or go hungry. Bumpy just picked up another tray and moved on. But something changed that day. He called a meeting with the leaders of every faction. Irish, Italians, Latinos, blacks, all gathered together for the first time in Attica's history. The meeting took place in the laundry room, during the 30-minute window when supervision was minimal. "Morrison is looking for an excuse to isolate me," Bumpy said, his voice quiet but carrying authority. "If he succeeds, you are alone against Dalton and his team." "And why should we care?" asked O'Brien, the Irish leader, a man with scars across his knuckles from 100 street fights in Boston. Bumpy stared at him. "Because after they take me, you are next. Dalton wants war in here. He wants justification to lock each of us in holes 2 feet by 2 feet. Divided he wins. United we are untouchable." It was the same logic that had built criminal empires on the outside. Unity meant survival. Division meant destruction. The leaders looked at each other. Old stories, decades of feuds, deep prejudices. The Irish hated the Italians over territory disputes that dated back to Prohibition. The Latinos were at war with the blacks over drug distribution. The different black factions fought each other over philosophical differences about resistance and accommodation. But Bumpy was right. Separated, they were vulnerable. Together, they were power. "What do you want?" asked Rodriguez, the Latino leader, a former Marine who had killed 3 men in a bar fight in Los Angeles. "I want that when they come for me, you stand up, all of you, as one man." It was an impossible request. These men had killed each other's friends, their brothers, their partners. They represented decades of hatred that ran deeper than prison walls. But Bumpy was asking them to put that aside, not forever, just for one moment, for one act of unified resistance. "And if we do not?" challenged Carmine, a soldier in the Italian mob, serving life for a murder he committed on orders from Brooklyn. Bumpy did not blink. "Then Morrison wins. Dalton wins. And you spend the next 10 years being treated like animals by men who think you are less than human. The choice is yours." Heavy silence filled the laundry room, broken only by the distant sound of water dripping from broken pipes. Then, one by one, they nodded in agreement. It was not friendship. It was not even respect. It was recognition of shared enemy, shared vulnerability, shared need. Morrison knew nothing of this. In the following days, he increased the provocations, confident. March 12th, during the shower, he made comments about Bumpy's mother, vulgar suggestions that echoed off tile walls. March 13th, in the library, he tore up the letter Bumpy was writing to his daughter, a 9-year-old girl who visited once a month and still believed her father was a good man. March 14th, in the yard, he spit near Bumpy's feet, a gesture of contempt that every prisoner recognized. Each provocation, Bumpy swallowed. But inside, something was being constructed. Not uncontrolled rage. It was cold calculation. Morrison was digging his own trap, and Bumpy was just watching, waiting for the perfect moment. "He is going to break soon," Morrison told Dalton, confident in his analysis. "I just need to push a little harder." He did not understand that he was not breaking Bumpy. He was building the justification for what was coming. March 15th arrived, the day of the weekly count. Morrison volunteered to lead the inspection of D Block. He wanted this moment. He wanted maximum audience for what he planned to do. "I will go," he said, smiling like a man who believes he has already won. Dalton nodded. "Make him break, but make it look like he started it." It was the final instruction, the permission that Morrison thought protected him. At 2:20 in the afternoon, Morrison entered D Block. 150 men lined up, waiting for the count. He walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the power. He passed the Irish, the Italians, the Latinos. Each group watched him in silence. Then he reached where Bumpy was standing. He stopped. He smiled the smile of a man who thinks he holds all the cards. "Number 4729, Morrison said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson." A dramatic pause. Or should I say, and then he said it. The word, the term that had been planned, the insult that ripped through decades of pain, centuries of dehumanization. The silence that followed was deafening. Every man in that corridor felt it, the weight of history, the accumulated rage of generations compressed into a single moment. Bumpy did not move for 3 full seconds, his eyes fixed on Morrison. Everyone in the corridor could feel the change in the air. It was not irrational violence. It was justice being calculated. Morrison, finally nervous, realized he had crossed a line with no return. "I said number 4729. Respond." Bumpy moved. He did not run, did not shout. He simply walked 3 precise, calculated steps. His right hand found Morrison's chin with surgical force. The sound of the jaw breaking echoed through the concrete corridor like a gunshot. Morrison collapsed, trying to scream, but his mandible no longer obeyed commands from his brain. Blood filled his mouth. Teeth scattered across the floor like dice thrown by fate. Guards ran from all sides, batons raised. "Solitary, take him!" But when they tried to touch Bumpy, the impossible happened. 150 men stood up simultaneously, Irish next to Italians, Latinos next to blacks. Rival gangs united for the first time in Attica's history. The pact was being honored. The impossible alliance was real. No weapon was drawn. No shout was given. It was the most terrifying thing the guards had ever seen. 150 dangerous men moving like a single organism, silent, determined. "Touch him," said a voice, nobody knew whose. "And this prison does not survive the night." It was not a bluff. Every guard understood that. They were outnumbered 7-1, and these were not ordinary men. These were murderers, robbers, fighters who had nothing left to lose. Director Whitmore arrived running, sweating, seeing his worst nightmare materialize in front of him. Morrison on the floor, moaning. Bumpy standing, calm, waiting. 150 prisoners forming a human wall. 3 choices: retreat, negotiate, or start a war that nobody would win. Whitmore was not stupid. He had read the reports from Attica's riot in '57. He knew how quickly these situations could spiral into bloodbaths. "Everyone back to cells," Whitmore said, his voice trembling. "Now." Nobody moved. He looked at Bumpy. "Johnson, do you have something to say?" Bumpy took a step forward. "Morrison forgot a basic rule. Respect is not optional. It is required. When he remembers that, when every guard here remembers that, we will return to our cells." It was a demand delivered with the calm of a man who knows he holds the stronger position. Whitmore swallowed his pride. He looked at the guards. "Morrison will be transferred tomorrow, and make it clear to the entire team. There will be respect in this prison, from both sides. Understood?" The guards nodded, defeated. Bumpy nodded. Like magic, 150 men returned to their positions. The count continued without Morrison. Order had been restored, but the power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Everyone knew it. The prisoners had won. That night in the cells, the story spread. What Bumpy Johnson had done was not just about a broken jaw. It was about a line being drawn, about dignified men refusing to be dehumanized, about real power not coming from uniforms or bars, but from respect earned and impossible unity. Bumpy had proven something that the prison system tried desperately to deny, that prisoners were not animals. They were men. And men, when pushed far enough, when united enough, could not be controlled through humiliation alone. Morrison was transferred before dawn, his jaw immobilized with wire. He never worked in a prison again. The injury never healed properly. For the rest of his life, he would struggle to eat solid food, a permanent reminder of the moment he forgot that every man, regardless of his circumstances, demands respect. Dalton was demoted 3 months later, after an internal investigation revealed the systematic pattern of racial abuse under his watch. Whitmore implemented a new code of conduct. Guards who demonstrated racial prejudice were immediately fired. One word had changed an entire institutional culture. Bumpy Johnson served 5 more years at Attica. No guard ever disrespected him again. The story of that day, March 15th, 1962, 2:23 in the afternoon, became legend, not just at Attica, but in every prison in America. The day that 150 men stood up as one. The day that dignity won. The day that proved that no system, no matter how powerful, can completely break the human spirit when men decide to stand together against injustice. It was a lesson that echoed far beyond those concrete walls. A reminder that resistance, when unified and determined, can shift the balance of power even in the most controlled environments. Bumpy Johnson had not just broken a jaw. He had broken something far more significant, the illusion that prisoners were powerless. And that illusion, once shattered, could never be completely repaired.